Hello, podcast listeners. Are you ready to advance your career in healthcare? Then join us at the Women in Medicine Summit, a 2-day power-packed event designed to propel you forward. The Hit Like a Girl pod crew will be there cheering you on at the Drake Hotel in Chicago, happening on September 13th and 14th. Get ready for skill-building workshops, inspiring talks, and actionable strategies to help you thrive in your healthcare journey. Here's the best part. Use code REFERRAL5 at checkout to snag your ticket at a special discount. We can't wait to see you network, learn, and grow alongside other amazing women in medicine. Secure your spot now at womeninmedicinesummit.org and enter the code REFERRAL5 to unlock your exclusive discount. Hello there, and welcome to the Hit Like a Girl show. My name is Joy Rios. I'm this podcast host, and this is a place where we talk about the complicated world of healthcare. I liken it to like a 30,000 piece puzzle that we're all trying to figure out, like, what makes up the U.S. healthcare system? How can we make sense of it? And each one of our guests brings their piece of the puzzle and their expertise to share with our audience. So, very excited to have you today as our guest. Aja, would you please take a moment to introduce yourself and your piece of this crazy puzzle?
Yeah. Thank you for having me. My name is Aja Hardy. I have been in, the healthcare crazy journal for about 20 years now. And I like to tell people that I developed software, implemented software, sold it, marketed it, and now I'm in the process of regulating with the idea that I'm looking at medical devices, and I work currently for the federal government, CDRH in particularly.
Okay, so what is your role? That sounds like a lot. I feel like we're going to learn a lot. We're going to learn a lot from you today. But as far as the regulatory side of things, what prepared you for that? And tell us a little bit what is involved on that side of things. I guess starting from, if I know nothing about how a medical device gets approved and then shared out into the world, what's its journey and how are you involved in that?
Yeah. Well, first I have to say that, my opinions are my own and not reflective of my current employer or previous. So I had to get that disclaimer out there. But yeah, definitely I can say that I've been on the side working on a vendor. So I started my career with Abbott in pharma and then also in Cerner, which is a healthcare IT company, recently was bought by Oracle. So I was creating electronic medical records, looking at those solutions, those devices that tied to that. And we worked with the federal government in the idea that we were a publicly traded company at the time. And we were looking to how do you put your device, how do you put your solution out to market? We have certifications that you have to adhere to. You have to show proof of concept when you're doing this device, or i.e. a solution like a healthcare IT solution, as I mentioned. And then there are guidelines. So these things that we push out, FDA pushes out, is called guidances that essentially let you know what you will have to include in your package in order to submit to us and say, hey, I would like to put this device on market. And then make sure that you are staying close to what you said your device was going to do for the population that you said it was going to be done for. And then it does what it's going to do. You have proof of concept, as I mentioned, which typically includes probably a clinical trial or some other form of trial that you've done, which also shows our results. And so when I worked in Cerner, I was on that side where I had to put all that package together, right? And had to be sure that we were figuring out if it wasn't a clinical trial, that we actually had, tested it in the market and that it did what it's supposed to be doing. It worked well with others in terms of other devices. And that we had, at that time, physicians or nurses that actually wanted to use it, right? So we also had a market case because, again, I was making a product at that time. And so then when we submit that package to the government, FDA, they take a look at it, they go through it, they scrub it, make sure that everything is where it says it's supposed to go. There's conversations that are had back and forth between the manufacturer and the, FDA in reference to, if there's anything that needs to be edited or changed. And then, hopefully you go through and you get, an approval and you get to put your device or your product on market and say that it is quote unquote FDA approved. And that's kind of how it works in a nutshell.
And if you were going for best case scenario, how long would that process take?
Ooh, that's a tricky question because it depends upon what you're putting out there. because there's various avenues of, well, I would say various submission processes of the different types of products that you may have and you may want to put out there. And it depending upon if you have any revisions or edits that are coming through that process, like once you get in front of us, then it could take quite a bit. We also have a thing called, and I didn't notice at the time when I was a developer myself, but like novel medicine, novel devices, and which means that, hey, this is something totally that we haven't seen before, so we're going to have to take some more time in looking into this, right? So, but it typically, runs the gamut for maybe like up to a year or more about certain things. And so when you're a consumer, like I'm a consumer as well, but when you're a consumer and you're out there and you're in CVS or if you're in the Walgreens of the world or Rite Aids of the world and you're looking and you're looking at the devices, even over the counter stuff, you don't really think about how long it takes for that to physically go and be in front of you, right? Similar to if you were thinking about even consumer goods, right? How long does it take for that cereal to be placed in front of you? You don't really think about that when you're just consuming. But I think that right now, we're finding rapidly the bridge between and working to form that bridge between consumer and developer, so that individuals like myself would know, hey, if I see this heart monitor, or over the counter like blood cuff, that's out there, that it took quite a while for it to get out there and for it to be physically, approved to do so.
Okay, I have like 4 questions running around in my brain right now. And
it's like open up the floodgates.
Yeah. Well, and it's partly because of the pace of innovation, and especially when it comes to AI. So when it comes to like the beginning of that process of trying to get FDA approval, by the time you're done through or completed with that process, how often is it that the technology has changed, or do you have to start over again?
Yeah, well, we're taking a look at that right now. I say the organizations, on both sides, right? So manufacturers are taking a look at that, developers are taking a look at that, and we are well within, the space, the federal government taking a look at that. And I would be remiss to say that there probably wasn't. I'm only 2 years in my role, and before I was in industry, right? So I'd be remiss to say that, before I got here, that all things went through or all these things didn't go through, because I really don't know.
But even ChatGPT's really only been available to the public for like less than a year. And I imagine that so many devices are going to be including AI.
Well, yeah, I think that that's definitely happening. You're seeing the inclusion of AI even in the things that we use currently right now, like LinkedIn, right? Like LinkedIn has one component, I wouldn't say it's an element, but like a component of AI in there. We're talking about general wellness, which we don't regulate right now, but general wellness and wellness apps. And I was speaking to one of my friends who's within the yoga circle, and she was telling me about balance and how they have, like, the meditation app in itself is AI infused, in that, it kind of crafts a different journey for you based off of the questions that you say. Like, do you want to know about mindfulness right now? No, I'm okay. Do you want to do 5 to 10 minutes? I'll just do 10 minutes. And then it crafts an actual meditation for you based off of that. I think so. Being that those are all new apps, right? Like Balance is new. It's out in the market. It's doing its what we call like volume test right now. So that means they've given it out in some cases free or even half, that type of thing, to get this knowledge that you're talking about. Like, how long does it take to adopt to certain things? We are obviously looking at, what it will take, where products are going with, AI ML. That's part of what the division in the office that I'm in right now, the Digital Health Center of Excellence, like what we look at is, AI and artificial intelligence and machine learning. So we're definitely taking a good look at that. Have we seen that type of, inclusion into existing products as of yet? It's coming. We know it is. But again, like that development process, as I talked about, like the volume testing of, say, Balance, right? That volume testing is being done right now, and it's being done, as I said, with a lure, what we call the FOMO lure. Like, you can get this free, or we can get it half to you for a whole year, because they need to have what we call a proof of concept or an intent to use for a whole year. They need to have that data. So think about if that was going to happen with a device. That's going to be asking someone to use a meditation app versus asking someone to use a device for, a year or more just to test it out. Like, that's going to be a larger ask. And so we'll see, that inclusion of AI or thought process of that AI come in definitely to medical devices. We're thinking it's coming, but it won't be as quickly as what you've seen possibly within, say, these already existing, tools that you're using that are maybe more consumer based.
On the medical device side of things, how much does interoperability come into play?
Yeah. It comes in quite a bit, because if you remember, when I got into the game on Cheat, which is now, on the Office of National Coordinator, High Tech Act was out there. It was, helping to nudge hospitals and health systems to be automated, by way of whether it be electronic medical record or, we had this thing way back in the day, I'm dating myself now, called National Health Information Networks, and we had those and ACOs and all those things. And so that was a start of the interoperability larger discussion, right? And at that time when I was in the part of Cerner, we helped, start that conversation by way of lab data, because Cerner was a lab solution to start, right? We started in a lab. And so lab data is highly numerical, and it's not necessarily one that could be, that subjective, right? So it's easier to start the interoperability conversation there. And LabCorp, you're familiar part of LabCorp, like the large institution was working with us on that. And so the first data elements that even came into that interoperability discussion and was able to transfer even between electronic medical records was lab data. So we, with that start of that conversation of lab data, then the next thing came about was, okay, what other biomarkers or what other data could we use maybe from, when you get your, initial temperatures and things like that. So numerical data, hard set data is definitely easier to do interoperability wise than it is, say, subjective, maybe treatment data. Free text. Subjective free text. And so when you're thinking about that with the devices, the first, and this is even before I came to my current, employer, was talking to, I think it was IDX, and they were essentially thinking about radiology was the first clinical modality to look at this whole interoperability and machine learning and AI, because of the idea that it's so many images, so many things that you have to take into consideration in order to even diagnose. And so radiologists have had it way before we even thought we were going to, and who would have thought, right? I, for one, didn't think that. I don't have any radiologist friends, but if I did, maybe I would know. But when you think about that stuff, you're like, okay, interoperability, machine learning tech, yeah, it got to be the physicians. The physicians are out there, and it got to be, but it wasn't even, it was really truly the individuals that were oftentimes and not in the basement of the hospital, because, radiologists don't have a really nice, just like pharmacy. I used to work in pharmacy, and pharmacy was always in the basement. We were all of the other people that are kind of working together were all in the basement. But radiology and pharmacy were one of the top ones, right? Pharmacy has a set formulary, as we call it. That formulary is designed and determined by the hospitals. And so it's not necessarily numeric data, but it is an actual hard set data set, because of the fact that your formulary is your formulary. It doesn't really change or falter that much, right? So now we know we can build upon that for interoperability pieces. And if we're getting, lab work that says, that your blood pressure is this, and we say, oh, wait, let's look at your treatment plan and see if you're on any medication. That medication we know will be something that was hard set within the pharmacy. So that's how that interoperability discussion and how it's physically happening right now. We do have, as you probably heard about HL7, the FIRE project.
Yeah.
So those things are rapidly coming into fruition. ONC just released some documentation around that too, about what's happening with FIRE and what's going on. So we have an interoperability group. We have a working group that is multidisciplinary, cross-functional. It's not doesn't just sit where I am. And so, that interoperability is a big piece of what we're looking at. And it definitely even, I would say, is a factor of translational science as well, too. How well does this work out in the actual population in which you want to do, once you serve it? So pre-post, as we call it, pre-market, before it gets to market, and post-market, after it gets to market. And that post-market is really where all the magic happens and where we're looking at going forward.
And imagine the world in which you live in, like when you're imagining the effect that you're having, it's on a big scale. Like you're not dealing with anything in small quantities because you're kind of I'm not going to, not gatekeeper, but basically holding things back until they are ready for a bigger population. Like it's a huge responsibility. And I imagine, I don't know, is there anything that you feel like particularly proud of that you're like, oh, I had a hand in helping that get out?
I'm just like you're saying right now in terms of thinking about the 50,000 foot level, like I'm just happy about how many people are at the table and wanting to have the conversation, right? You know, it's a totally different ball game from where I was before. We're not creating products, right? We're not a money-making institution. We're essentially really just serving the public, and we are there to serve the public. And you're right, it is a large responsibility to look at, and not just, I'm in medical devices, but not just medical devices. We have like tobacco, we have food, we have cosmetics even. I mean, I'm interested as a woman who now wears makeup. I'm interested in like, what I put on my body, what I put on my body, like the cosmetic pieces of it. I was talking to some friends that work in that space, not too long ago. And all of those elements, all those things are ran by or have people in them that really truly care. And it is just amazing to see how much breadth like all of your organizations and agencies have. And then also, the people who are in, I think I'm pretty smart. I guess I got 2 master's degrees, but there's people here that have like PhDs and this has been their life, like this is, they're really dedicated to it. In terms of, I guess, anything that I want to like kind of maybe even point out. I mean, just the standing up of this whole, we're the Digital Health Center of Excellence is like 5 years in existence. We're a baby as well. And we've gone through our growing pains, our ebb and flows, and just the idea and the thought that, within all of the iterations of whom we are, there's people on the team that, again, are just really, truly here, like myself, to stand up something that makes a difference and will continue to do so, and move forward to this. And these people are coming to tables. We just had a conversation around synthetic data not too long ago. And it was just like, whoa, like these people are, I'm learning something all the time. And I'm hoping that, that I'm bringing stuff to the table too, because like I said, my experience is being in a vendor development space and going into Big Four consulting, then going and being a startup and then being in VC and then coming back full circle. I've seen a lot of different, lenses. So hoping that, we all bring our skill sets and our experiences to the table and we're heard, and be able to, put that to good use and help and serve the public in this process too.
I have a special affinity for public servants, and just like I find them to be so humbling. Of just like, wow, the people who are very, very educated and are dedicating their life to making life better. Hopefully for the public,
hopefully,
right?
Yeah, that's the goal.
That's the goal.
That's the goal.
I'm curious about your journey. So you have 2 master's degrees. Like, did you think that, did you have an idea of where you wanted to end up? And are you there? Are you past there? Are you not there yet? Where do you land in your map?
Yeah, I do have 2 master's degrees. I have I tell people like, typically my path has not been linear, but innovation rarely is, right? And I also say that there's a method to the madness. So I took a detour from my path was to be a doctor, and I took a detour from that path, and it led me to an American Hospital Association fellowship. It's a program that I think is still in existence to this day, Diversity in Health Management. Shout out to them, But did the fellowship in my undergrad, had no idea about it. And I was exposed in that fellowship to like Abbott Laboratories, like I mentioned. I'm from Chicago originally. And so it's crazy enough that they have their own zip code. It's Abbott Park, Illinois.
Wow.
So crazy enough that I heard of Abbott, but, I knew some friends like older than me had worked there, but didn't really know that much about it. But just through the fellowship was able to, get connected there, had, a tenure in Abbott. And then we also got a chance to like view different types of hospitals. And one of those hospitals was the VA. And the VA at that time was going through automation, like, putting in their electronic medical record and things of that nature. Again, as you think about it now, kind of archaic technology, and that there was wires coming down and you had cows, computers on wheels. But I looked at that and I was like, well, I was like, I decided then that I could impact more people by like figuring out this health tech thing instead of putting out a single shingle as a sole physician. And so that's kind of where my journey detoured. And it was at a time when, my school is known for producing people who go into, medical school. And half of us who were pre-med ended up going and going straight to getting a master's in public health. And the other half went straight to med school. And I think at that time, like our chancellor was very concerned about that change. But I think but I also feel like it showed something of a difference in the industry, right? That we understood there's a business to healthcare and that there also is, it's about around the time a lot of people were talking about like physicians had bad bedside manners, all the things in the business. So going into public health, I think was one of those avenues where we said, hey, we want to understand more about, not just the treating of the disease, but the treating of the patient.
Exactly.
Right. And understanding what the environment, how it impacts it. And so I'm proud that was one of our shifts, but I did do the, MPH. I got my degree is in international health systems management. It's like a dual degree. So I have like some domestic, some international stuff. It's crafted from Tulane. So it's crafted, you can run a hospital anywhere in the world if you go type of thing. And then when I graduated, I did look at government, crazy enough. I applied to I think it was called a PMI, Presidential Management Internship thing at that time, which kind of like your entryway into government. And I applied to, several other companies and I thought I was going to go into government. I got the PMI, but they had to place you. It was like a matching process, similar to if you were in physician going to med school. And it took forever. It took a long time. And I was living off of my savings at the time, waiting for it to happen. And I was like, I guess
you're like, the clock is ticking. I can't.
Yeah, I was like, the clock is ticking. And I was like, oh my gosh. And then at that time I was, still talking to other interested parties. And it just so happened that Cerner was one of those interested parties. And they was like, hey, we'll bring you on board and you can do this executive development program. We'll rotate you through and this, that, and the other. And
that's great.
Yeah. So that's how I tell people I fell into tech. So that's kind of really how it would happen.
Whenever I say this out loud, I'm like, I need to check this stat, but I'm pretty sure it's true that a third of the economy in the US is somehow related to healthcare.
Wow.
A significant portion. And of course, that's not all doctors and nurses. It's software and technology and policy and like a million other things of people that are all trying to do better. And I also like the difference between like public health and medicine. And sometimes those two feel so divorced, the way that we treat them.
It should not be. It's like never the two shall meet, right? It should not be. It was very, as you can imagine, like when I started and I was doing this electronic medical record thing, it was looked upon in academia as like woo-woo. Like we'll never, like this will never catch on. It was like kind of how some physicians and nurses felt, and I was in the health administration section, like for APHA, like in my professional association, which is the American Public Health Association. And I was telling them, I was like, hey, I'm not really an administrator, but I work with a lot of administrators. But I think that what we're doing is public health informatics. And I was like, no, it's not. And I was like, yeah, it is. And I was like, no, it's not. And I was like, it's a story. So I'm not going to like prefix it, but essentially, I did think about going to government. I never say going back because again, I started to go and it didn't work. And so my second foray into trying to get into government again was doing the CDC Public Health Informatics Fellowship, right?
Cool.
And I applied for that, got it. And then the gentleman said at that time, the people who were in charge at the time said, hey, we don't think you do public health informatics. Whereas though when I did my actual presentation, when I interviewed, the other people there were interviewing with us as well. And there was a nurse that was interviewing using a presentation of a Cerner implementation that she was on that I was, I was a part of the implementation team. And she was presenting her work there because we have to work hip and hip is what's kind of what it's called. Like the consulting method was hip to hip. So we really was working truly with the nurses, really was working truly with the physicians, crafting their workflows. What people now call user experience and user design is what we were doing at that time. And she was the head nurse of one of those, work threads. And she presented her stuff as like, this is what I did, X, Y, Z, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, oh my God, this is great. And I'm like, hey, I work for Cerner. And that was my client. Like didn't even know that we were going to be there at the same time. So yeah, so when the gentleman said like, hey, what you do is not public health informatics, I mean, I think just the scientist in me just like took the definition of public health informatics from the Webster Dictionary and outlined it and gave every example that was underneath the definition and then sent that back in.
Good for you.
Yeah, I was like, no, I'm okay. I'm not gonna see CDC right down at this time. But that was my second chance into getting into government.
So the FDA is actually your third attempt. It was like your third time's a charm.
Yeah, it's like my third attempt. Yeah. It's kind of crazy, right?
What would you say, like, what is the experience like working for the government? Like, some people are like, oh, you're the bad guy or you're the good guy. It depends on people's perspective, right? Like,
yeah. I mean, I think anywhere you would get like similar. I mean, we'll put it this way. I would say anywhere. I'll use my own personal. When I was a Cerner, it was like I was the good guy. I was a bad guy. When I worked at, a Big Four consulting firm, I was at Deloitte and Huron. You can only imagine, you come in suits. That's an indication that something's going to happen. You are a manifestation of change management. And you know that individuals do not, even myself, I can't say that I love change all the time.
Well, that's scary. You represent change, and that's scary by definition.
Yeah, you represent change, and it's scary by definition. And so just to think that in your career sense, you have been, or I have been, if I look at tell myself personally, at least half of my time in my career, about like 15 years or about 10 or so years ago, I've been the personal manifestation of change. And I have experienced people's reaction to that personal manifestation of change in all degrees and forms and fashion. I used to tell a story about how I was like 20 something and working in a hospital and doing again the implementation, working in registrar's office. So like even just the basic kind of keying in of like the registration information. And a nurse told me that she had been working for this hospital longer than I've been alive.
Wow.
So what do you do with that information? Like, do you just like take that personally and be like, I'm here and this is, no, I was just like, okay, you're right. That's probably true. That's more than likely true. I'm not even discrediting that. I was like, I'm here to help. Right. The idea is that this change is coming. I know it's scary, but I'm here to help you through it. And we're going to be here as long as you need, and once you get this, which is easy peasy, you're going to get it. Like once you get this, then you'll be able to manifest that and change that to other things. Right. Just like, so in the idea of like, what we look like in the market. I mean, before I came to federal government, I was at city government, and city government, same type of probably, view that the public has. And to the point where I would walk around and go to, well, not walk around, but I would go to like public engagements or even create public engagements. And I'm talking to people and I would get comments like, why are you so happy?
Oh, how dare you?
Or I'd be like, are you sure you work for the government? You're very personable, And I'm like, yeah, But this is the message that I crafted then, and this is what I would say we're probably still doing here in the federal government space. That we understand that we have been transactional in nature, right? But we're looking to be transformational. And in order to be transformational, we have to be relational, which means I need to work with you. I need to be in front of you. I need to meet you where you are.
Yeah.
That's pretty much what I used when I was in city government, and it was transactional to transformational. Has to be relational. And that's where I think we are here.
Okay. Well, you touched on something briefly a minute ago, which had to do with your yoga practice. So I'm like, how much of that comes into your play as far as just like mental health, peace, knowing where to find your peace and your balance and bringing that with you where you go? Does that fall into the ingredients of your life and making things?
Yeah, thanks for that. I know a couple of times we were talking about possible hobbies or what keeps you balanced. And I would say that I wouldn't be honest with you if I said that sometimes the balance is not, it's not really where I want it to be. Right. sometimes you get wigged out. Sometimes you're like, oh my gosh, like, I don't know if I'll be able to accomplish this or what.
I would guess that there's a lot of pressure. I would imagine that there's a lot of pressure in your work. So I imagine you also have to be able to come from a place that you can handle it.
There's a lot of pressure, just like people's jobs, everybody's jobs has like some form of pressure, right? And then I think with ours in particularly, I'm scooting up because I think my light, like what's going on my light here? But yeah, I'm originally from Chicago. I'm from Hyde Park, and Hyde Park is a very, diverse neighborhood, interesting neighborhood. And so I needed balance and some decompressor even at an early age. So I adopted a meditation practice at an early age. I didn't know what it was. I just, this is what exactly I would do. I lived across the street from the University of Chicago. So I would run in the weekends on the University of Chicago's campus with my mom. And then, when she would go back to the house, I found this statue of some general on a horse, who knows? I don't know what it is, but it was a statue and it was like, in a big placement. I think it's still there in the park where you can essentially kind of like walk on it, get on it, whatever. And then there's like a settee. There was like a settee all around it. And I would go and sit in the direction of the sun, and I would just close my eyes and just relax for a minute. I was doing that at like 12 years old.
Yeah.
I didn't know what it was at that time. I just knew I liked the sun on my face. I liked being able to just drown out everything. I liked the space and the time, just kind of being still, and realized as I got older that I was meditating. I didn't know what that was. So I've tried to keep that adoption of a meditation practice in the rest of my life. Do I meditate every day? I try to. May not happen, but I try to get at least a meditation in a week, if I can. The other piece of the puzzle is that I think being a creative, it extends beyond just like the digital health side and me being a physical like developer and implementer and that type of thing. It also extends to like my hobbies, and so I like physical activity, but ones that I can choose, if you will. But that's ranged from like karate to kickboxing, salsa dancing. And now
I love
yoga. Yeah. And now yoga. So the yoga practice, it's something that's structured. It probably just could be from my mom's a teacher. She's an educator. So, I was one of those kids that had like, here's your chores Monday, Tuesday. I had a structure when I was a kid. So it could just be something that's like that. I'm sure my therapist friends would probably tell me that's something like that, a coping mechanism. I don't know. But
it seems like a healthy coping mechanism, so that's fine.
Yeah, but the fact that it's structured, like some type of structured exercise that I feel like I can attain to is helpful for me. So that's what yoga is doing right now, as I'm sitting with you and a little bit sore, but that's what it's doing.
And the good kind, hopefully. Well, Aja, thank you so much for sharing your journey and all what you do. And hopefully, I feel like I've learned a little bit more about just like the role of the government in helping bring products to life and to the public. And thank you for helping to make it all safe.
No, thank you for having us. Yeah, thank you for having me. I appreciate that, and the knowledge, and just trying, wanting to know about what we do.
Right.
And that's knowing is half the battle, right? We're trying to work on our visibility and our transparency. And this is part of it.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you being open. If people want to connect with you or follow you, where do you direct them?
Sure. If you want to connect with me, LinkedIn is best. And I'm at my full name, Aja Hardy. So that's AJAHARDY. And it has MBA, MPH in the end of it. And that's all one word. If you want to find out more about the agency or even the office I belong to, please just look up, use whatever your search apps are. I won't say Google it, but just whatever your search apps are. Just look up CDRH, the Office of Strategic Partnerships and Technology Innovation, and our webpage will come up. You can even say CDRH OST, and the webpage will come up with everything in reach. And so you can get the chance to see about the division that I'm in, cool. Digital health and all the other divisions that we have that are doing similar activities and working to help make things safe for you all.
Well, thank you again. This has been lovely.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
Yes. Thanks for listening. You can learn more about us or this guest by going to our website or visiting us on any of the socials with the handle #HitLikeAGirlPod. Thanks again. See you soon. Again, thank you so much for listening to the Hit Like a Girl podcast. I am truly grateful for you, and I'm wondering if you could do me a quick favor. Would you be willing to follow or subscribe to this podcast, or maybe leave us a rating or review? Or if you're feeling extra generous, would you share this episode on your Instagram stories or with a friend? All those things help us podcasters out so much. I'm the show's host, Joy Rios, and I'll see you next time.